The gunman left behind not only YouTube videos in which he discussed killing sorority girls and all the girls who had rejected him sexually, keeping him in a life of virginity. He also left behind this, a 140-page manifesto suggesting that this was so premeditated that he had time to write and to rewrite and draft. It is the ramblings of a man who begins counting his life from the age of 0 up until 22. It is titled My Twisted World, the story of Elliot Rodger, a 140-page manifesto justifying apparently, or at least shedding insight into what he did, this horrible tragedy. First of all, Brian, let me ask you, you see something like this manifesto. How do you as a defense, as a criminal defense lawyer, even try to defend against something like this when it is so clearly spelled out about what his mental state was?
Well, Deborah, I think what the manifesto reveals is that he was previewing what he was going to do. And that gets to a very important point that I want to make, that's vastly different than what other members of the panel have said. I think a big issue here that we have to take a look at is, when did the family first report to law enforcement the YouTube clip or any comments that he made about wanting to slaughter people? And then we've got to look at how much time law enforcement had to really do an investigation in this, because in the aftermath of Sandy Hook and Aurora, everybody was out there saying, why didn't somebody report this before it happened? Here we have somebody reporting it. We have a family member reporting this to law enforcement. Why wasn't there an immediate intervention? Because I think your psychologist guest will agree that a lot of times in mass murder, the person who's going to do it, they're crying out for help. They want somebody to grab them, intervene, and stop them from doing that. So we need to investigate why there was a big gap in not investigating this once it was reported to law enforcement.
So, Brian, look, we're expecting,
Brian,
one second, Lou. Brian, we're expecting a press conference. It's going to happen within the half hour. Law enforcement, the sheriff's deputies, a lot of other people who are going to be there, hopefully giving us more information. There is information that the family did go to authorities to try to get help because the videos that Elliot Rodger was posting were so disturbing. What is the family's responsibility? Did they do everything they possibly could have? Because look, we know how this ends. People are going to start pointing fingers, and they may start pointing fingers at the family who may have felt as helpless, as everybody else.
Deborah, I think this is a critical point. We need to find out what exactly did the family communicate to the police department. That is monumental, because we live in a different society right now after Sandy Hook, after Aurora, after all the other mass shootings you identified. We are never going to be able to get rid of guns, but one thing we can do is work from the inner core. Who are the people closest to those who want to commit mass destruction? And if those people are reporting it to law enforcement, then I think there's a real problem if an investigation wasn't done. Let me read you something real quick, if I may, Deborah. In that YouTube video, Elliot Rodger said, on the day of the retribution, I'm going to the hottest sorority house of UCSB, University of California, Santa Barbara, and I will slaughter every single spoiled, stuck-up, blonde, you-know-what that I see inside that house. Now, you tell me that you have a YouTube video that says that. If you get that to law enforcement, there is no excuse for law enforcement to not immediately go over and apprehend Elliot Rodger and then do some due diligence, get him some mental health, and you can possibly stop this.
Lou, go ahead.
You're absolutely correct, sir.
Brian Claypool, you earlier said that this is something that you don't know whether enough was done or enough could be done. Have you dealt with a criminal defendant like this person before? And again, I'm going to cut you off if they start talking, so just beware.
Sure. Deborah, I've actually dealt with plenty of civil rights cases in which victims have been shot by law enforcement and they have been mentally challenged and they've had mental disabilities. So I'm very sensitive to the mental health aspect of this. And all I'm trying to say here is that in a situation like this and the other mass shootings we've had, you've got to look at the red flags. There are red flags. what we as a society do with these red flags is really the teachable moment in all of this. And for example, you know, Lou was talking a little bit about gun control. I think maybe a suggestion I have is, and tell me somebody out there if we don't already have it, is if somebody is treated by a psychologist and there is a medication prescribed to that patient that deals with depression, anger, rage, or a mental disorder, and they already own a gun, then somehow we have to have a system in place where the gun can be revoked, that there's a procedure in place to do that. So I think there's things we have to do here to try to take back the guns if there is a mental disability, if that makes sense.
Brian Claypool, the first incident
Deborah,
in which he had an interaction, one second, the first interaction that he had was back in July 2013. Brian Claypool, apparently he made up charges that he was the one who had been the victim of an assault when deputies found out that in fact he was the aggressor. What does that tell you about him?
Well, it tells me that he's delusional, and Jeff made a good point too about the fact that anybody would file a report about stolen candles. I mean, you have to connect the dots, Deborah, and it's all about the red flags. That's what I talked about earlier. The red flags were very apparent here. And I've dealt with law enforcement before with mental health suspects. You have to call in, a lot of law enforcement have what's called a KIT team. It's a critical intervention team. When you get a call about a welfare check, you have to call in a mental health specialist. If you don't, it's like saying, somebody has a drinking problem. Can you go interview them and ask them whether they have a drinking problem? What do you think they're going to tell you? They're going to tell you, I don't have a drinking problem. What are you talking about? So we needed a mental.
Yeah, and I think Brian nailed it when he said, when did they know and what did they know?
Brian is right.